So today I want to talk about the ability to sell without selling, right? And this is for any professional who's selling professional services, either if it's accounting, tax, real estate, anything. So the ability to sell without selling is very important, right? So the ability to sell without selling, it's proactive and reactive at the same time, right? You know, I'm not a pushy person, so I don't like pushy people around me, and I don't like individuals who are always trying to sell me something, right? The whole idea is that you have to forget that you're buying a service or a particular thing from a particular person, right? That's the idea, right? So so it's mutually beneficial. So everything you always have to do is it has to be mutually beneficial, right? So um obviously, I grew a CPA firm, so how we pretty much build a lot of our customer base through networking, going to events, and straight setting up shop. We set up a headquarters, a physical location, and we had you know walk-ins and people just calling into our office. But most of our clientele pretty much we got from networking and going to events, right? And during tax season, we didn't really get that many people walking in during tax season, right? Um, and um, so that's important. Um, so one thing that I want to talk about, another thing I want to talk about is the ability to break rules, right? The ability to break rules. So, and why that is important. So that's important because um uh you it gives you your leeway to being able to think for yourself, right? So what may work for me may not necessarily work for somebody else, right? So for example, I'm not a pushy salesperson. I'm more of a long-term relationship building guy. I like to build relationships over the long term, right? Right. I don't really need to um push services on people. That's just not my personality, right? I mean, obviously I'm a mid-career professional, but I take the more approach of accounting where you have to sell without services. You have to sell without selling, right? That's my professional take on that. That's just who I am as a person, right? That pretty much means that I have to meet you somewhere, right? And when you need me, I'll be here. I'm that type of person, right? Um, that's just who I am as a person. Um, and I think taking the more proactive route is more of the traditional sales route, where you do constant follow ups with individuals, where you're constantly calling a particular potential clients. That's important too. Um, just for they won't forget you, because a lot of times people might forget about you, so that's an important element also. I'm not trying to say that you can't do that in accounting, which that probably would be effective if you're selling to individuals, but when you're doing business to business relationship, that might not necessarily be so effective, right? um so and being able to have an open mind um is very important, right? So being able to so there's this poker player named Annie Duke. She's a professional poker player, and she has a PhD in psychology, I think. And the one thing that she said was, it's very difficult to deconfirm what you already believe that you know, right? And that from belief that what you know comes from the ages of 0 to 10, right? That's what you think you may know, right? So and and that's crucial because you have to be able to have an open mind to being able to take information outside of what you may think is wrong and being able to look at that and making sure that okay they possibly could be right, right? In other words, you're pretty much saying that you could be wrong, right? Being wrong is part of okay being a human being. um and so again that goes back to being able to break rules, and I kind of equate that to thinking for yourself, right? I'm not trying to say okay you got to be able to take certain risk and they have to be calculated, and because every decision you make is a bet, right? We're making bets all the time, and that's just I think that's just part of life. So therefore, it's part of creating a business and offering services and implementing a sales and marketing line because you don't know if it's going to be successful or not. But the reality is, um, the rule of thumb is that you give an individual enough time, and he will eventually figure this shit out. I mean, and that goes with building a business, right? Um, um, so that's important, I think, right? And I come from a long line of individuals that have been in the military. I went to a military school. I did, the reserve officer training, and one thing that um they stress to us is that you are a leader at all levels. All levels exemplify leadership. And why is that important? Because you're going to always lead yourself in any situation, either if you're part of a group or not, right? You always in how you lead yourself is going to be very important. And I think that's going to be very important and how you build a business, how you build relationships in general, right? Leading yourself is important, right? I think a lot of times, in the private sector, working for these, individuals seem to forget that, right? And, a lot of times you have the manager employee relationships, right? It's just kind of odd. I don't really don't see it like that, right? I'm a leader wherever I go. Either if I'm not, I could be an associate. I'm going to be a leader, right? I could be a partner. I'm going to be a leader, right? You just have to focus on what you have to focus on and be a leader in what you're doing and how you lead your life, right? Um, and you can't focus on what everybody else is doing, right? Because what everybody else is doing may not necessarily work for me, right? Um, um, and being able to think clearly and your decision making is very important. Thinking clearly is a very rare trait, and I don't know. I took that. I was reading McKinsey Way. I think it's called the McKinsey Way. It pretty much breaks down like certain ways of thinking and being able to solve problems, and they would tell you why thinking clearly is difficult to do because the reality is most humans don't really take that much. They don't really necessarily take that much thought process into this decision, which is not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because you don't want to spend that much time on a thought, right? So, if, for example, if you're working at a bigger firm, right, or and you doing your day to day tasks, well, those day to day tasks are going to be repetitive, and it's going to be put in a certain framework, right? And I worked in, so let's just say right now I'm doing sales and operations at Great Bar because that's my main job right now, right? Um, we shipping and receiving. Well, how we ship and receive is the same process how we do all the time. It's the same process. This isn't. We don't detour away from that process, right? Um, so that's just the reality. As far as improving that process, nobody's thinking about improving that process. I mean, it's a process they've been doing forever. So we don't they don't think about improving it. So I don't think about improving it because it's not worth my time to think about improving that process. But that's just the reality. So being able to think clearly is very important. Being able to make decisions is very important. I don't necessarily think they're like, you know, it's that hard, but I think a lot of times, you know, um, there's certain confirmation biases that you may have, right? Um, you know, overestimation of your abilities, underestimation of your abilities. You know, seeing that middle ground of what you can and can't do is very important. And from my experience, that's not going to deter away from a client relationship, right? It is not. You don't have to know everything, but you have to have the ability to understand that you don't know everything, right? Um, and that's very important. Which um and so I mean, and so yeah, I think that's just the only thing that I want to talk about today. I have to do a few things. I got to work out. I'm about to go work out right now, and I got to study. Um, and so yeah. All right, see you guys later. Bye.